physically can't ask for help, even when you know you need it, like your mind is saying, just ask, it's not a big deal, but your body is doing something completely different. Your chest tightens and your throat starts to feel like it's closing up. Your thoughts get a little scrambled, and suddenly it feels like it's literally impossible. I want to talk about this because for a long time, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. I thought it meant that I was too full of pride, or maybe I was just too in my ego or too independent. But that's not what it was. What it actually was conditioning. And I don't just mean that in theory, I mean that from my lived experience. I grew up in an environment where asking for help didn't feel safe. Not because I was told no all the time, but because of how I was responded to. It was the tone, the agitation, and the feeling that me asking for something, even something small, was somehow creating stress. Like I was putting someone out just by needing something. So even if the answer was technically yes, it didn't feel like support. It felt like I'm a burden or I'm causing a problem just by asking. Like, how dare I need something? And when that's what your experience is over and over, your system adapts and you start asking less than only when it's absolutely necessary. And if you're like me, eventually you might stop asking at all. Not because you don't have needs, obviously, but because asking stopped feeling safe. And I want to really be transparent about how deep that can go. I got to a point in my life where I just wouldn't ask, even when I needed help the most, when I was struggling the most. And right now, I'm literally living in my car. I've been in situations where I didn't have food for days, where I didn't have resources, and I genuinely needed support. And even then, my instinct was still not to ask, not because I don't need the help, but because somewhere in my system, asking still felt worse than going without. That's how powerful the conditioning is, but being in this situation is starting to teach me something different. I don't have the luxury of avoiding asking for help anymore. I've had to ask people for help. Like today, in fact, I hadn't eaten anything since Sunday and I was starving, and I knew that I had to get some food in my system. And I had to ask somebody, and somebody pulled up next to me at the gas station, and I asked if they had any food that they could spare, and they did. And I was very, very grateful. And that's what's been pleasantly unexpected, is how people have responded. Strangers, people who don't know me, who don't have any obligation to me, and they've been kind and generous, and they haven't made me feel like I'm a problem for needing something. There's no sigh, no irritation, no sense that I'm too much or some kind of burden because I need to eat. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been a little disorienting for me because it doesn't match what my system expects. And that's where this gets to be a super important thing to realize, because what I'm experiencing right now is the difference between what I was taught and what is actually true in the world. And that's what I mean when I talk about a mind-body split. Your mind might grow up and understand logically that people help each other, that it's okay to need things, and that support does exist, but your body might still be operating off that original programming. If you learned this the way that I did, your body might have learned asking equals stress or rejection. So what happens is your body shuts down the asking before your mind even gets there. It's not a conscious decision you make. It's like an automatic reflex. And it's why you might sit there thinking, I should call someone, and then you just don't. Or you start to ask and then you backtrack, minimize, or say things like, never mind, I'm fine, it's fine. That was a big one for me. That's not a weakness though, it's just protection. Your nervous system is trying to keep you from re-experiencing something that was learned. It learned that that was painful. That pattern doesn't just break because you understand it though, it breaks through new experiences, through evidence, moments where you do ask and something different happens. Or instead of being met with irritation or stress, you're met with kindness or neutrality or even just a simple, yeah, of course. And every time that happens, your brain and your body get new evidence, and that's how you rewire it. Not by forcing yourself to feel safe, of course, but by showing your system over time that it's safe. And I'm literally in the middle of that process right now. Every time I ask someone for help, even when it's majorly uncomfortable, and trust me, it is. Even when everything in me wants to shut down, and they respond with kindness, it challenges that old belief. It starts to create a new one, and it doesn't happen all at once. Of course, it's literally moment by moment. but it's real. This is also where reality starts to just disprove the belief that you're a burden, because if that belief were true, that every time you ask for help, people would respond with resentment, right? Or the same way that you were taught that you're a burden. If you went through it the way I did, that is. But that's not what actually happens. And maybe everybody out there already knows this, but I feel like I can't be the only person in the world that's ever experienced this. There are people, sometimes complete strangers, that will show up with generosity, with care, and without an agenda, and no sense that you're too much for needing something. And when you experience that enough times, something in you starts to recognize the safety. And something else that I think is really important, safe support might not look like where you were taught to look for it. Some people were wired to seek support from people who couldn't give it in a safe way. And so we internalized the idea that support itself was unsafe, instead of recognizing that it was the source of the support that wasn't aligned. For me, that looked like continuing to need support from the same place that made me feel like a burden in the first place, and having to come to terms with the fact that that might not be where safe support exists for me. And that's hard to accept. But it also gives way for something else, because it means support isn't off the table, it just might look different. And it might come from people I barely know, from communities or moments that don't follow the old script that I was taught. And that doesn't make anything less viable, it just makes everything more honest. It's like de-gaslighting in a way, because if you're ever taught to believe that you are too much for needing anything, especially from the people who are supposed to support you the most, that's gaslighting, right? Because that's not true for anybody. That's not reality. And because it's not filtered through those old dynamics anymore, it's just that you realize it's just human, right? We're all just human. So if you're someone who struggles to ask for help, I want you to understand there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your system learned something and learned it well, right? But it's not permanent. And every time you ask, especially when it feels hard, you're creating the opportunity for a different outcome. And every time that outcome is different, even in a small way, you're teaching your nervous system something new. You're showing it, I'm not a burden for having needs. I don't have to do everything alone. And I'm not saying it from a place of having everything completely figured out, of course. I'm just literally right in the middle of living through this, from sitting in my car, having to unlearn this in real time, and realizing that maybe the world isn't what I was taught that it was. That maybe people aren't as burdened by me as I was led to believe. That maybe I was never a problem. And that, of course, doesn't erase the past, but it does start to change what feels possible moving forward. So if this is something you're working through, just know the fact that it's hard doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're right at the edge of rewiring something that's been there for a really long time.